Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, visionrecordingstudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And this week we're going to take a look at another Slate Digital plugin. We're going to take a look at the custom EQ, part of the virtual mix rack plugin, or it's a module as of part of the virtual mix rack. It's over here in white on the left. This is the new custom series. This is the equalizer we're going to look at today. A couple of weeks ago we looked at the CS Lift and kind of compared that to the Revival. And what I'd like to do this week is I'd like to compare this custom EQ to the other two EQs that come along with the virtual mix rack, so you can kind of hear the difference between the three different EQs and then decide for yourself whether it's worth I wouldn't say upgrading, purchasing another one of these EQs. So they have three very distinct sounds, as you'll see. So we're going to listen to it on a kick drum, on a set of overheads, an electric guitar, and on a female vocal. And we're not going to do this in the context of the mix, although that's the most important whenever you're EQing something. But this is more or less just on isolated tracks. You can kind of hear the difference between the three EQs when they're set to the same parameters. So you can hear the difference. So when you purchase the virtual mix rack, part of the virtual mix rack is you get the FGS, the SSL, sorry, SSL EQ here in the center, and then you also get the FGN, which is the Brit NEQ, which is a replica of or an emulation of the NEVE, and then over here is the custom EQ in the white. So this is a kick drum here. We're gonna solo up this kick drum quickly, and we're just gonna listen to the raw track before. Again, you can see all the modules are turned off here, so we have no EQ at all. Here's what our kick drum sounds like. This is the raw kick drum. Keep in mind you're going to hear some bleed from the other instruments because this is also from a live recording. So there is some other instrument bleed. This is a live drum kit, not a virtual instrument. Okay, now we're going to kick on the custom EQ. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the parameters and how I kind of tweak this in a little bit. So again, this is a live recording, so in the kick drum and in the overheads especially, you're going to hear other instruments bleeding in, and I've used some EQ to kind of take out some of the bleed on some of the instruments, so keep that in mind. But this kind of stuff, you'll get live recordings and these kinds of things happen. So on the custom EQ, if you take a look, and if we walk through this quickly, you'll see that here we have a high frequency band, and these are stepped frequency selectors. So you have 10K, 12K, 15K. It's not a variable, so it's either going to be a 10, it's either going to be a 12, or it's going to either be a 15K. Okay, we have no boost here happening at the 10K. This is off. You can see the gain knob here, plus or minus 10 dB, and then you can engage the frequency by pressing the button in. When it's lit up, that band will be turned on. When it's grayed out, it'll be turned off. But if you have it enabled and you just keep it at 0 dB, it's not giving you cutting or boosting anything at that frequency. Okay, in the high mid, we have 2, 4, and 7K. At 4K, I have 2.75 dB being dialed in. And on the low mid frequency at 400 hertz, we have 400, 600, or 800 as our selector choices. I have it on 400, and I took quite a bit out of 400, about 6.85 dB. And then the low frequencies at 60 hertz, I have it boosted up quite a bit at about 5.73 dB. Okay, then down here you have a high pass and a low pass. Both of those are off at this point, and then you have input, output, or an output attenuator or cut here as well. So that is how I dialed in this particular kick drum. Again, once again, I will do a before with no custom EQ, and then I'll enable it so you can hear what the after result is. Okay, so it gets a lot thicker, a lot more in your face, a lot more bottom ends, not as papery thin, cardboardy. So that's the custom EQ. So now, the real point of this video was to kind of just compare it to the SSL and to the NEVE. Again, they're going to sound a little different. That's the point. They don't sound exactly the same, but just to kind of show you the difference. So here is the SSL. So we're going to shut off the custom. And I have on 2 SSLs here because I have a couple of overlapping frequencies. I had to add a second EQ to make it a real apples to apples comparison. So up here, again, at 7, on the high frequencies, we don't have any boosting here. We have, on this first one here, I just used the low frequency. So at 60 hertz, I boosted it 5.72 dB, just like I did on the custom EQ at 60 hertz. Okay, same 5.73 dB. Okay, on the second SSL, so at 4K here, we have a boost of 2.74 dB, just like I did on the custom EQ 4K, 2.75 dB, close enough. And then on the 400 hertz, which is down here, I cut 6.90 dB, just like I did on the custom EQ. And then the 60 hertz boost, I had to use two SSLs here because I can't cut at 400 and also boost at 60. I don't have enough frequency band choices here, so that's why I added the second SSL to boost the 60 hertz, just like I did on the custom. I give about 5.73 of a boost. So on the SSL, 5.72 dB of boost. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to bounce back and forth and compare. I'm going to turn the custom on and off and then turn the SSL on so you can kind of hear the difference between the two. So we'll start with the custom, and then I will shut that off and then turn on the SSL EQs, and you can hear the difference between the two. Again, same frequency choices with both EQs, same amount of boost or cut depending on the frequency, and here's the difference sonically. Here's the custom. There's the SSL. And we'll go back to the custom. Okay, so what do you hear there? The difference here, obviously the custom EQ is a lot more low end, so that 60 hertz boost on the custom EQ is a lot more heavy. It's a lot more obvious than it is on the SSL. Even though we're boosting the same amount of dB, but almost 6 dB on both, the custom EQ seems like it's a little too much, where compared to the SSL, where it seems like it's not enough. Okay, so what else do we hear? What about the top end of that kick drum? So let's take a listen to that. That's the bottom end. So we're on the SSL right now. Listen to the beater. So the custom EQ seems a little bit more focused, a little bit more refined to me. Now let's compare that to the NEVE. So let's turn on the NEVE here for a second. And again, the same thing with the NEVE. Now the NEVE's a little bit different in, not so much on the kick drum because we didn't really do any high-end boost. You have more of a shelf up here. So when we get to the other elements, it's not really comparing apples to apples because the frequency choices aren't exact between two EQs, but it's close enough. If we take a look at the NEVE here at 400 or 4K, again, we boosted up 2.75 dB, which is the same as we did on the SSL and the same as we did on the custom EQ. At 400 hertz, we took out about 6 dB. Again, same on the other two EQs. At 60 hertz, we boosted about 5.75 dB. Same on the other two EQs. Okay, so now let's turn on the NEVE and we'll go back and forth. I'll kind of toggle between the NEVE and the other two. So here's the NEVE. Go back to the custom. Back to the NEVE. Go to the SSL. Back to the NEVE. Back to the custom. Okay, so again, a very different sound. The NEVE, excuse me, is somewhere between the custom EQ and the SSL as far as the low end goes. But it still sounds like to me in this particular case, on this particular kick drum, in this particular song, I like the custom EQ a little bit better. It's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more focused, a little bit more tight, a little more punchy than the NEVE and then the SSL. But the SSL and NEVE have it sound good in its own way. Again, 3 different styles of vintage EQ. Now, the custom EQ is not a direct emulation of any one specific EQ like the SSL and the NEVE is. It's a culmination, I think, of a few different EQs. I think the way they say it on their website is some of the best characteristics of some of their favorite EQs kind of combined into one special EQ, if you will. So that's on a kick drum, again, just so you can hear the difference. Now let's take a look at it on a set of overheads. So we'll mute the kick here. Okay, this is the raw track, and then what I'll do is I'll engage the custom, and then we'll walk through the frequency selections. Raw track, custom EQ. Okay, so a lot of the low end is going a lot of the rumble, obviously, because we did a high pass filter here. So let's start at the top here. At 10K, did a boost of about 2 dB. 7K, a boost of about 2 dB. 400 hertz, a reduction of about 2.5 dB, cutting. Nothing in the low frequency, and then at the high pass filter at 248 hertz, 250 hertz, okay? So now let's compare that to the SSL. If I turn on the SSL and turn off the custom EQ, and I'll toggle back and forth again, we have the same frequency selectors, 10K, 2 dB, 7K, I'm sorry, not 700 hertz, 7K, 2 dB, 400 hertz, negative 3 dB, and then we have a high pass filter at 250. Okay, so let's just toggle back and forth between the SSL and the custom. Here's the SSL. Custom. Okay, so the difference there I hear is obviously they both get rid of the low end with the high pass filter, but the SSL seems to be a little bit more open to me. The custom EQ in here, especially when you get past the snare and you're listening to really just the hi-hats, they seem a little bit more warm. The SSL is not as warm to my ear. Again, you can, derive your own opinion. Now let's go over to the NEVE. Let's take a listen to the NEVE. Again, all the frequencies are the same. We don't have to walk through them. Trust me, it's the same as the SSL, same as the custom. I'll toggle back and forth between all 3 to let you hear the difference of these 3 EQs. Okay, so there's on a pair of overheads. Again, much different. They all sound completely different from each other, even though we're using the same frequencies and cutting and boosting by the same amount. Which one do you like better? In this case, I tend to like the NEVE a little bit better. But again, I would be doing this in the context of a mix. And again, keep that in mind. Whenever we're EQing things, we're always doing it in the context of a mix. Here, we're just kind of comparing the 3 EQs to say, do I really need the custom EQ? Do I need to pay for that when I have the SSL and I have the NEVE? Well, it's another color on your color palette if you want to look at it that way. It does sound different, just kind of comparing the 3 together. So now let's take a quick listen to this on an electric guitar. And let's listen to what we got here. Again, here's the raw guitar track. I'll engage the custom. The raw track. Okay, so there's the custom. What are we doing here? 15K, about 3.5 dB to kind of bring up the top end. 7K, about 3 dB. 600 hertz. Oh, there's nothing going on at 600, sorry. 200 hertz, about a 2 dB, 2 dB boost. And then we're rolling off at around 100 hertz. We're doing a high pass filter. Okay. So now again, same thing on the SSL, same exact frequencies on the NEVE. Although the NEVE has this high shelf. It's a fixed frequency point. You can't dial it in at exactly 15K. And in all the Slate literature, I'm not even sure this high shelf exactly at what fixed point does it start giving a shelf. But I still boosted it a tiny bit just to try to get close. But again, keep in mind, it's not exactly 15K, but the rest of the frequencies are exactly the same, and the boosting and the high pass is all the same. So in the spirit of trying to speed up this video, I'm just going to toggle between the three so you can hear the difference. The SSL. The NEVE. Okay, so between those three EQs, again, which one do you like better? I tend to like the SSL better on this. The NEVE seems a little bit too harsh. Again, you can dial in the NEVE frequency-wise a little different than the SSL, maybe achieve the same result. I'm not saying you couldn't get a good sound or a better sound with the NEVE. You could. But again, that's not the point of this video. This is picking the same frequency points. The custom EQ is not bad too on this, but I tend to like the warmth of the SSL on this particular guitar track. So again, I'll just toggle through it one more time and then we'll go over to the female vocal. We're on the custom. SSL. NEVE. NEVE hurts my ears a little too much on this particular track. So now let's try a female vocal. And let's see what we have here. Let's do the same kind of thing. So we're going to start with the raw track.
Ooh, I can feel it when you walk. I can feel it when you talk.
Custom.
I can feel it when you walk. I can feel it when you talk. I can feel it. Oh, heat.
Okay, so what do we do on the vocal? 15K. Trying to make this more of get a little bit more air here, about 5.5 dB of a boost. 4K, about 1.5 dB of a boost. 200K, about 200 hertz, about 1.28 dB. And then a high pass filter at 100 hertz just to make it simple. Same thing with same exact frequencies with the SSL, and again, same frequency choices with the FGN. Again, the only difference is at 15K, it's not exactly 15K. We got a little bit of a shelf here, but I'm still doing it up at around 5.5 dB, okay? So again, I'll toggle between the three. I'll start off with the custom, and I'll move over to the SSL and then to the FGN.
With fire on our tails, this train's racing down the rails.
SSL.
As you're slipping in My back's against the ground.
Neve.
I'm melting like a drowned. And I'm pulling for you. Said I'm pulling for you. Oh, I can feel it when you walk.
Custom.
I can feel it when you talk. I can feel it when you walk. I can feel it when you talk. I can feel it. Oh, heat.
This is the SSL.
With fire on our tails.
Neve.
This train's racing down the rails.
Okay, so to me, the Neve and the custom in this particular track with these particular frequency points sound very similar. The Neve, again, is a lot more open on the top end. The SSL is a little bit more warm sounding, which is the characteristic of an SSL. And the Neve has a characteristic of being more open and a little bit more punchy in the top, upper, mid-range frequencies. So that's the difference between these three EQs. Again, I'll play it a little bit and I'll just toggle between all three. I'll shut up for a minute. Just keep your eye on the power lights and then we'll end this video. We'll start off with the custom EQ.
As you're slipping in, my back's against the ground. I'm melting like a drowned. And I'm pulling for you. Said I'm pulling for you. Oh.
Okay, so there's the difference between those three. Again, in the context of the mix, the Neve may be a better choice here because that top end is really going to cut through. But again, we won't do that in this video. You can do that and experiment on your own. But that's just the difference between the three EQs that come with the virtual mix rack. Again, is the custom EQ worth purchasing and getting along with the SSL and the FGM that already come with the virtual mix rack? Well, again, I always say this. I said this with the CS Lift as well, and I say this with plugins in general, especially when you start talking about vintage style plugins, because that's what these are. They're emulations of the old vintage gear, and if you're into that stuff, these three EQs are very different from each other in that they don't sound exactly the same. They all have their own special sound and tonal characteristics. And again, I always use the analogy of being like a painter. If you're a painter, you can have, 3 different colors on your palette, or you can have 10 different colors on your palette, and you can have 4 shades of red and 3 different shades of blue. You get the idea. They all have their uses, and they will all sound better or worse on certain elements of a mix, depending on the track, how it was recorded, the style of music, and all the other variables that go into this. So what I would say is, if you want some more additional tonal variation, and you're into vintage processing and you like the analog vibe, I would say yes, if you like experimenting with this stuff. If you're someone who's on a budget and someone who can't go out and just buy every new plugin that comes out that sounds like an old piece of hardware, and you have to kind of limit yourself for budgetary reasons, or because you want to limit yourself because you don't want all those options, because sometimes you can stifle yourself and stifle your creativity by having too many options, and we'll talk about that in another video. I'm going to do a whole big video series on plugins and options and why you need to limit yourself, but then maybe not. It's not a necessity. If you have the Slate Digital Virtual Mix Rack and you have the SSL and the FGN that come along with it, you have plenty of tonal variations there to get some really great sounding vintage analogness to your tracks, regardless of style of music. The custom EQ is not necessary, but it is also a really cool tool if you want that extra tonal variation added to your toolbox or to your color palette. So I hope that was helpful. For more tips and tricks and training, head over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And if you want to learn more about me and my mixing and mastering services, you can always head over to visionrecordingstudios.com. And until the next time we take a look at some additional plugins and DAWs and everything home recording, this has been Dave from homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care.